we're going to talk a little bit about the J6 people are very important to me because I was there January 6th interviewing people, and I must say 98% of the people there that I saw were really just there to petition the government for the redress of issues. Mm-hmm. They believe that I think history will show that the 2020 election was totally stolen.
Right.
Although the good Lord works in mysterious ways, I think Donald Trump, the Donald Trump that I see today, from the Donald Trump in 2016 and 15 and 16, is a different Donald Trump.
Yes, 100%.
He knows what he wants. He knows where the pitfalls are. He's not going to be led around the nose by anybody. He's going to go with his instincts and trust his instincts, which are right on. It's going to be an entirely different administration this time around, plus the fact he has a House and Senate, which I think he's going to get, the support 98% of the time.
Really get things done and really make the best out of these short, even though 4 years seem like a long time to those on the other side, for those who have been waiting 4 years for this, we know how fast 4 years can go by, but where we all are, we believe the president when he said day one is when the real work starts. And, the groundwork that we're seeing him lay now, the various cabinet appointments,
God.
Exciting. It's, that dream team that we all were waiting for to come together his first term, which when we didn't really understand how insidious and how sneaky and how, how many tentacles
we just couldn't believe that people would do this.
No, right.
And for me, in my connection to Cynthia Hughes and Ed Martin as both being in the Phyllis Schlafly group, and I'm chairman of the Pennsylvania Phyllis Schlafly group, we've been very close to what happened with the J6. What they have done to J6 people is just unbelievable. What they were willing to do to fellow Americans, many of who served this country, is just unbelievable to me.
And still the public perception towards them and the disdain that uneducated neighbors of mine have.
I wouldn't call them uneducated.
No, I'm talking about the anger and the disdain that people in our communities have towards somebody from the J6
because
event.
of the censorship models that have been out there. People really don't know the full story. And for people like me and you, me being actually there and seeing what's happened is really interesting. Look, there's clearly evidence and there was an article, it's called Evidence Mounts that the J6 was a false flag to legitimize expanded domestic surveillance.
Right.
And I truly believe that that's how you come to a dictatorial state. Mm-hmm. And I think that was always the goal of these people.
Yeah.
They didn't care about the lives of the people. They didn't care that Pernod, killed himself and the anguish they've given. They don't care that they go after 70-year-old ladies for being in the Capitol building and calling them terrorists or insurrectionists.
Right, and while there's actual people who in other cities, that peaceful summer of love that we had when it was just anarchy and chaos and nothing happened to those people, it's so interesting. And so I think a lot of people are looking forward to 4 years where the average American who is expressing their protected rights is not going to see the government weaponized against them.
I hope so. Now, on the line, talking about J6 people, and this show, we're basically going to talk about what you see in the future. We have Tim Hale on. Now, Tim Hale is a J6. He was in prison for 3 years, basically in a gulag. Is still kind of walking around on eggs at this particular point. Trump has indicated that he's going to be reviewing, the J6 situation. Tim, welcome to the Don't Back Down show. I really appreciate you calling in. Just for our listeners, I know your story, but I'd like you just to take a brief time to explain what happened to you, how you got caught up in this whole thing, and the 3 years of hell or 4 years of hell that you've gone through.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. My name is Tim Hale. I was a comedian and actually also a employee of the Department of Defense for 12 years. I was a soldier and I was a Navy contractor.
Wait a minute. Sounds like a little oxymoron, a comedian and a member of the Defense Department.
Yeah.
How did that work out?
I've always had my finger in a bunch of pies. I've always been more creative. I've always been a fan of art, satire, acting, and all that kind of stuff. So, when I take off the uniform, I love to live stream and just make a mockery of things. It's kind of hard not to when you're in the service, too.
Yeah, oh yeah. Having been in the Army for 6 years myself, there's a lot to satire. And look, I've met you a few times, and you're quite a gentleman and very knowledgeable person. So go ahead with your story so people get a handle of what's going on.
Yes, sir. Like I said, I was a Navy contractor, so my overnight job, I got off my overnight shift and I threw on my suit and tie and I drove down to DC, 4 hours from Jersey to DC, and we was just there to hear a speech. I didn't even know there was going to be a protest at the Capitol, and so we ended up going down there. And before Trump's speech was over, it turned out that people were knocking barriers over around a perimeter. And the average person doesn't know this. They think just a bunch of Trump supporters went to attack the building. But actually, and the video from my phone proves this, we were just peacefully chanting, but supposedly we were in a restricted area. Well, nobody knew that. So the cops, the Capitol Police and Metro PD start firing into the crowd, flashbangs, CS, and tear gas. And this actually incites a riot. And the public doesn't know this. They just see the same 30-second clips over and over of a window getting broken. They don't really know how the riot actually started. So it wasn't an insurrection. It was actually Trump supporters getting attacked and reacting. And so, it's a salient observation that nobody bats an eye when BLM burns the country to the ground or Antifa or whatever. But when Trump supporters are allegedly engaging in an insurrection, nobody has any questions about how it actually started. Trump told us to peacefully and patriotically protest. I was there.
Yeah,
he never told us. He never told us to commit a crime.
I can concur with that because I was there and heard the speech, and he said it several times. He said, "I understand people are going to the Capitol building. Please, be peaceful and everything else." I mean, I think he had a sense of what was going to happen. I think he understood that this is a setup. This is bad, so we were definitely set up in many ways.
Well, he offered National Guard support, and there's actually body cameras from the Metro PD. When they arrived, they're saying they set us up, and the question is, well, who's they? Because Trump offered National Guard support, the Metro PD answered to Mayor Bowser, and the Capitol PD answered to Nancy Pelosi. So who set them up? It was an inside job. Trump offered support. They set us all up, and there were people in the crowds. Go ahead.
And Tim, who's to say that some of the people who started breaking down the barriers to incite people to do something were the infiltrators and the FBI guys who were set up to go after the Trump supporters? And look, we know that this existed because we just have documentation that FEMA refused to go help people with Trump signs on their lawn. This is an incredible story. I mean, it really adds up. Americans have to understand. They were being used. These people were being used. And I must tell you, the people I interviewed that day, there were moms with kids. Everybody was kind of happy but sad, but they were there for one purpose, is to say, we don't believe what happened in this election because we have eyes and we know that this is impossible for this man to have won the election by 20 million votes. It was impossible.
Yeah, I mean, and you made another important observation: the composition of the crowds. There were senior citizens there. There were kids there. A lot of the riot actually resulted not just from people defending themselves from excessive force. It was because they saw people getting abused. I served in uniform. There were a lot of former law enforcement there. There were veterans there, and they're watching old ladies get body slammed with riot shields. And this is something the public just doesn't see. It's not part of the narrative. And you're right, absolutely. There were FBI informants inside the crowd, like James Knowles. He infiltrated the Kansas City Proud Boys. We know from court filings there were dozens of feds and informants who infiltrated these so-called extremist groups. It was a setup from the very beginning, from the first breach to the end of the day. It was a setup. The feds infiltrated it and they incited it.
So now you're in a restricted area, which you did not know. What happened to you? The FBI come to your door with being armed and everything else and all that. How did they come to you, and what basis did they arrest you to begin with?
Well, it's kind of a funny story in a messed up way. I was leaving one night. I lived on the base that I worked at, the Navy base, and I'm leaving the base. I'm going on the off ramp, and I get pulled over on the way to the pet store to get food for my fish. Which are all dead, by the way. I got pulled over by about 20 20 SWAT vehicles. The cops come out, FBI, NCIS.
Wait. You're driving to the pet store to get pet food after leaving the base where you live because you work in the Defense Department, and the next thing you know, you're surrounded by 20 vehicles and God knows how many FBI agents and SWAT team, right?
Yes.
And obviously, were you armed at all at any time? I mean, did you carry any
Absolutely
weapons?
not. No, I don't even have a firearm permit. I was an armed guard, but I was issued firearms for work. But I've never been a big gun guy. That's just me personally. Not even just because I'm in Jersey. No, what?
See, the comedic part of you is coming out.
I try. I don't like to brag, but I will. What had happened in my case?
Feel free to throw any jokes out there you want because people do not like my jokes, as my introductions proved. Go ahead.
I just flew in from the gulag. Boy, are my arms tired. My employer had tipped off NCIS I was at the Capitol. They didn't know the details, but they tipped off NCIS, and they came to my house looking for me. But it actually turns out they found my roommate. So they strapped my roommate with a wire to get me to talk about J6 when I had been drinking that night. So they tried to incriminate me and then set me up as a domestic terrorist, like the next Timothy McVeigh. And so the next evening, that's when they had pulled me over. So I get, they try to interrogate me. They take me in, and I spend about 2 weeks. I spent from January 15th to February 3rd getting bounced around by the U.S. Marshals until I finally arrived at what they called the D.C. Gulag, which is the jail in Washington, D.C., where I spent 2 years altogether. And of that, I spent about a year in solitary confinement. And then I spent another year in prison after that. So I spent about 3 years incarcerated on a 4-year sentence. A lot of it before I was even convicted at trial, because they wouldn't even give me my trial. I was in pretrial detention.
I want people to understand this is a fellow American who is unarmed, goes to the Capitol, and listen to what's happened to him. If you don't think the people that were in this administration over the last couple of years are not diabolical, the people that run this, they are totally diabolical, and they do not care about human beings at all. It is a one-world globalist society. They will destroy you at any step of the way. I often think that my phones are tapped, and not to be paranoid about it, and I really don't care because at my age, it doesn't make a difference to me at this point. But I'm listening to your story, and every time I hear your story, I just get the chills that your government could do that to you. Now I know what it was like to truly live in Nazi Germany when Hitler took over in the 1930s. The fear that has to exist in people. So now you're in the DC Gulag. How it's been described to be as so bad. Describe to the people what it was like to be interned in that holding cell.
Well,
in DC.
Well, first I'll say it's only paranoia if it's not true. And it probably is true. Just keeping it real in America today. But as I indicated before, we spent the first year roughly in solitary confinement. So it was 23 hours in your cell, maybe an hour out to take a shower or use the phone. And this would gradually lighten over time, but those were the initial conditions, and they were able to use COVID, because keep in mind, DC is worse than any deep blue state when it came to the COVID lockdown. So they had carte blanche to do whatever they wanted to us. And so they were able to deny us access to our attorneys, deny us access to our families for visitation. We were denied religious services. We couldn't take communion or see, clergy. We were very often denied access to basic civil rights. And the reason was because COVID. What they had done was they offered us these things if we agreed to take the COVID shot. And what happened is that some people, not myself, I didn't take it, but some people got the shot and they were still denied. So they had just lied in order to coerce people into taking a COVID shot. But people,
because they wanted to ultimately kill you, because that's what COVID shots do. It doesn't protect you against COVID, and it actually the data is now showing that it is actually detrimental to your health in many ways. So just go ahead with your story. I'm glad you didn't take the shot. I would have been right there with you.
Yeah, it's funny because they had like these dystopian, like Orwellian propaganda signs all around the jail promoting the shot. It's just like, it was a little too on the nose, but in terms of that, there was basically no medical care offered. We had an old man, a 70-year-old Vietnam vet. His name was Lonnie Kaufman. They framed him. They accused him of having Molotov cocktails, which is absolutely not true. And his arms and hands were purple. I don't know, it was the circulation or something, but I mean, they did not give proper medical care to these guys. The food, people complain about the food, but jail food is bad in general. But this was really bad because there was just no nutritional value in any of it. It was all soy. There was no meat, no vegetables. And then, of course, really, again, due process was really the big issue for me because I fought my case pretty hard. And they wouldn't let you get your evidence half the time. The guards would sometimes come in and shake down cells and try to take away your evidence so you couldn't work on your case. And like I said earlier, they would deny you access to your lawyer. So when Marjorie Taylor Greene the first time was trying to come in the jail to inspect the jail, she was turned away. That was the same day they did the same thing to my lawyer.
I remembered when she did that. I tell you, that's one gutsy girl. You can say whatever you want about Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I want to tell you something. She is a committed person. She is definitely a mama bear type of person, and I really appreciate her guts. I really do. But go ahead.
Well, yeah. I mean, eventually, I think it was in the fall of 21, where she and Louis Gomer came in. Finally, they were able to force their way into the jail to do a little tour. And they came finally to our pod because, for those that don't know, we were segregated from the rest of the jail. They basically kept us locked away in a madhouse. The main jail is called CDF, Central Detention Facility. They hid us away in CTF, the Central Treatment Facility. So we were locked in a nut house, basically segregated away from the rest of the jail and of society. We rarely got sunlight, so going outside was almost never happened for recreation. No fresh air. Our vents were full of black mold. And what's just funny is, like, whenever there was an inspection by the marshals, or when they suspected someone from Congress might show up, they would just have people paint over all the mold or all the rust on the walls and stuff like that to make it seem like everything was up to shit. It was a condemned building. They actually told us, the guards told us, they admitted this. And I believe them, that they actually cleared the jail out for us. They cleaned it out for us right before January 6th because they knew we would be there. This should have been a condemned area, and it was fixed up, so to speak, for us so that they could keep us there.
Which goes to show you that this was a definitely planned. The whole goal of the Democratic Party, I don't want to call it Democratic, the Democrat Party was to destroy Trump. From the day he came down that staircase, they've been trying to destroy this person forever, doing everything. So they knew this was a setup, and you guys were going to be, somebody was going to be there. So they arrest you. These 20 people arrest you. You go through all this stuff. My question to you is, and I think I know you a little bit, is you've got this huge ability to draw walls up, to isolate yourself from the reality of what's going on and keep your frame of mind. But I'm sure other people, it was just like they couldn't believe this was happening to them. How did you keep your sanity in those conditions? What was your hope that you hung on to that it was going to turn out that you will eventually see light of day, literally see light of day?
Well, there's a few things there. I despite being a sort of a clown or a jester, I do have a strong faith, and so there are things that motivate me in life besides self-gratification and immediate relief. So I believe every man has to bear his cross. So I'm always prepared to suffer for what I believe in. The second thing I suppose. The second thing I suppose is that I'm not a misanthrope, but I am an introvert. And you mentioned putting up walls. I guess the best answer for me would be sheer tyranny of will. I'm a real battle axe. Here's the thing. I was prepared to sit there as long as I needed to win. And even though I lost a trial, I ended up winning in the Supreme Court. So, and of course we won with the election. I see things for how they are, not how I want them to be. So I'm always prepared for the long game. And that was pretty much it. I was already in solitary. And so I was prepared to retreat into my own mind. I always like to say my mind is a universe, and I control that universe. So whatever was going on inside the jail...
I'll tell you what, that's pretty powerful thinking out there. And I got to tell you, just listening to you and having met you a few times, I always define people that I want to be with is, would I want to be in a foxhole with these people under fire? Because some of these people I know, they'll turn around and they'll get shot in the back because they're going to be running away from it. But somebody like yourself, I want you in my foxhole because I know you'll have my back and I'll have your back. And so I appreciate the strength and courage. And I eventually believe that the J6 people who suffered through this are somehow going to be honored by their fellow Americans once the real story gets out. Now, we've had this election. Today is the anniversary of the week from this all happening, because we found out that he won last Wednesday morning. So we're technically just a week away from it. What is your expectations? Because I know there was talk of people talking about he's going to pardon everybody. I don't think, personally, I think that there is going to be a move toward this, but it's not going to necessarily be. They have to set the stage for it, so there has to be some investigations. What do you see as someone who has been in it? What is your hope, and what do you see for the next 6 months down the road?
Well, the first thing is that I don't want another psyop to happen like we got caught up in, whether it's on the 6th or on the 20th. I never put anything past DHS or the DIA or FBI or any of these, three-letter agencies. So my first hope would be that nobody gets caught up in any nonsense and this doesn't happen to anybody else. The second thing is that I just want to return to normalcy outside the pardon situation. I don't want us to weaponize the government like they did to us. It was a horrible precedent. When you look at Roe v. Wade and you look how long that took to overturn, or whether you look at Brown versus the Board of Education and how long that took from Plessy v. Ferguson, our common law system is very vulnerable. It's a beautiful thing, but one bad precedent can take forever to overturn. So I don't want the precedent of J6 being weaponized against even the Democrats going forward. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing with regards to pardons and with regards to moving forward, the first thing I would actually like to see, because I think pardons are a little more complicated than people realize, legally speaking. The first thing I would like to see is just my friends get out of prison. I actually got lucky, as weird as that might sound. I have friends who are doing longer than I am. Some of them have 12-year sentences, 8 years, 14 years, and they don't deserve it under the worst circumstances. They don't deserve it. And, this was, it's wholly uncalled for. And so the first thing I'd like to see is at minimum commutations of excessive sentences. And I would like to see people get out of prison and back to their families. And then I would like them to stop the prosecutions and stop raiding people's homes and stop hunting down old ladies for trespassing.
That's what I want to stop immediately. I want the FBI to be totally called off of this, because this is, the effort being done on this is crazy, especially since we know it was a setup at this particular point.
They even came out and said since June to now, the amount of people that the FBI is still tracked down and put into a prosecutorial state and still moving against this has been continuing to grow. It's never slowed down. It actually ramped up after Biden's disastrous debate performance. But then I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because, everyone keeps asking you, okay, you want to move on from this and you want to put this behind you. But, more than just being put into jail, your reputation and your character was just the attacks upon you were just insane, and you're still getting them. When we saw you at Bedminster this summer, and then NPR had a hit piece out, within a month of that. So do you envision any future lawsuits against any of these media outlets that have just, really been brutal and untrue about your character, or have you given any thought to that?
Well, first, I'd just like to say to the parasites at NPR, I know you're obsessed with me, and I appreciate those who are obsessed with me. Thank you so much.
I love you more. I love you more and more.
It was an NPR article. Even though I know you, I've met you several times. I always like to do a little research before we go on, and then I came across that article, and I'm reading it, and I said, "Oh, what a really horrible, really nasty piece." And I actually think I was talking to that journalist during the event, and so it's just, I don't know how I would react to that, but I can't even imagine after being, detained and the unfair treatment and then just everything that you've had to go through, you're still having these type of pieces being written about you. So do you have any plans to pursue any litigation against any of these people or any of these outlets?
Well, here's how despotic our system is, truly. NPR, especially National Public Radio, it's government funded, and so what they did, for those who don't know,
my strategy is defund NPR.
I would agree.
Don't need it. Defund it. Defund it.
I agree. And here's the thing: is they denied us bail, they kept us in jail. And then they planted federal informants in the jail with us. And then these informants, working for the government, send dirt to NPR, which is publicly funded. They make up lies and they smear you. And then they publish that. And then the prosecutors then cite those public stories because it's public information. They cite that at my sentencing hearing to get me over twice my sentencing guidelines. So instead of time served at 20 months, they make me out to be this monster, and I get 48 months. I get 4 years instead of 20 months in time served. So, yeah, there's a lot to look at there because of the incestuous relationship there. But, yeah, in terms of all the massive hit pieces, they're still writing hit pieces about me, and my sentence is over. They're obsessed with me, and it's actually kind of funny.
Well, that's because when the truth comes out about you, they will have no leg to stand on. They're on the defensive right now. When you see that, that's a defensive operation that they're doing. But I think on January 21st, I wouldn't mind saying, NPR, you're defunded. Go find your own advertisers and everything else like that, because it is the biggest waste of money I've ever seen. These people aren't worth anything that there's for that.
Go get a job at BBC.
Yeah. Boy, hey, I want to help you write your material for your next.
Oh, no, they know.
I would love for you to go on the Bill Maher show and talk to him about this stuff, because it would be really interesting, because that way the other part of this country who does not know the story of what happened will at least be able to go through with somebody that's experienced it. And I'm just overwhelmed. Knowing you're about the most non-threatening person I've ever met. I think I could beat you up with one hand tied behind my back. I'm just saying. You probably wouldn't need hands. I don't know. It comes to mind my left foot, so maybe I should be all right with that one. We've got a comedy team rolling here now. Who's on first?
Welcome to the WB.
So then I guess, so then the next logical question is, what's next for you, Tim?
It's funny because friends, family, everybody wants to know the path going forward, and being me, I especially like to war plan everything. Or war game everything, and think ahead. But the truth is that so many different things are based on factors that are out of my control. Like, how's the election going to go? How's the Supreme Court ruling going to go? I think I'm going to get good news about my appeal soon, because again, this is how convoluted it is. I still have an appeal for my conviction, even though my sentence is long over. And the Supreme Court already overruled the one felony I have. That's how slow the wheels of justice turn. But I like to say that the wheels of justice turn slow, but the wheels of tyranny always stop. So I think that once Trump is in office, he's going to make us all whole. However that looks, it's up in the air. But I think that going forward, I'm not going to be able to pick up where I left off. That's just not possible. And everybody wants to do that when they get out, because it's like time froze. But you just can't go back to where you left off. But I would like to.
It's like being on the battlefield. After the battle's over, no matter who you are, you're never the same afterwards.
Yeah.
You just can't be the same afterwards because of what's happened to you. I would probably be, and I know that doesn't see, I see this peacefulness in you, which is great, which allows you to move forward. There's clearly, I have a lot of anger in my heart for you, for the people that did this to you, because when I look at it, it's how can a human being do this to somebody else? Of course, we have plenty of examples in humanity and history of human beings doing terrible things to other human beings for no reason at all. And we see evidence of this every day. The FEMA episode in Florida, when they refused to give service to people that lost everything in the latest storm because they had a Trump sign on their lawn.
Right.
And to me, it's obnoxious. So you envision that Trump should be able to get 98, 99% of the people out of jail. Would you like to see a real investigation of January 6th, where all evidence is displayed and people have a chance to look at everything and then make up their minds in a truly unbiased way that it was done before?
I think that would be a good thing. It's been beyond January 6th too. I think it's been a long time since we've had a real church committee style investigation into the kinds of activities that our agencies are involved in behind the scenes. So when you look like the Wolverine Watchmen with that fake kidnapping plot with that militia out of Michigan, it's going to get worse if we don't nip it in the bud now. And I think, all cards need to be on the table. And the problem is that, of course, even with the J6 sham committee out of Congress, they've destroyed so much evidence. It's like, we got to get everything out there. And I think even before pardons, this is me, I'm speaking for myself, but I would like to know all of the crisis actors and informants who are at the Capitol. I would hope that we can get lists from the DOJ, the DHS, if there were DOD. Again, having worked for the government myself, I know that there are elements within the government, even the ones that we respect, like military or law enforcement, intelligence agencies, like there are bad elements in there. And if they're being weaponized against American citizens to entrap a third of the population, that needs to be known. And, I don't think we should be pardoning feds, to be perfectly frank. And I know there were Antifa members there, too, trying to agitate. It was a very complex day. It was a very complex day.
Yeah, I noticed walking up Pennsylvania Avenue or Constitution Avenue, walking toward the Capitol. I saw what's-his-name with his horns on, and then I saw these people in black and ninja outfits, and I'm saying to people, and I've been to a lot of Trump rallies, I said, I've never seen these type of people. This is not good with these people here. And, of course, they're cursing all up a storm and trying to get people agitated and all that. Tim, we got a break for a quick advertisement, and we are going to come back with number one when you can do that. Number one and number two. All right, we'll play number one and number two. So stay with us, Tim.
Yes, sir.
And we will be back in a minute.
Hey, Philly, New Jersey. Diane Cardano, team leader at Cardano Realtors. It's that time again to get your free Thanksgiving apple or pumpkin pie. Stop by the Abington Firehouse for our community Thanksgiving pie open house on November 26th and pick up your pie just in time for the holiday. Also, I'll be signing copies of my newest book that I'm very excited about, Model Home Mindset, where I share the strategies that I use to help home sellers just like you get top dollar for their homes, such as expert negotiating, smart marketing, and strategic planning. Also, I'll reveal insights on the 2025 market forecast, such as prices, mortgage rates, and inventory. So, reserve your free pie today. Enjoy lunch, desserts, and get a copy of my newest book, Model Home Mindset. Go to getfreepie.com. That's getfreepie.com. Or call 215-576-8666, 215-576-8666.
Within hours of Trump being declared the winner, numbers appeared on the internet which are accurate that showed the vote totals in the last four elections. In 3 out of the 4, the number hovered between, say, 59 and 65 million. And then you have this weird anomaly in 2020 where it was 81. What happened to those 15 million? That just does not make it. I just dare anyone to explain that to me. I mean, I'm not a scholar on this stuff, but what I will tell you, so I think a good number of those on the super positive side of this, there are a lot of people who actually did vote for Joe Biden, who could not stomach voting for anyone other than Donald Trump this time around. I think it's great. Yeah, but Trump's numbers stayed the same. Yeah, Trump's numbers have stayed the same. True. Through 3 elections, pretty much the same.
Letitia James, she filed a suit and said that Donald Trump had overvalued his Mar-a-Lago residence, which she said was worth about $17 million, and therefore got a loan from the Deutsche Bank that he otherwise wouldn't have, and therefore he had committed fraud. The bank in question said they had no problem. They knew exactly better than she did the exact value of Mar-a-Lago. Most people think today Mar-a-Lago may be worth anywhere from $100 to $200 million. Anybody who drives by it can see that. 20 acres with waterfront on both sides. So the bank in question that issued the loan said not only did they have no problem with the assets that were used as collateral, the loan was paid back promptly and with profitable interest on their part, and they would issue another loan again. So that has never been used against a public figure in New York, or any figure.
You know, this kind of, Tim, these two stories kind of just tie into exactly what happens to you, how this government has been so weaponized against its own citizens, the setup for J6 because they wanted more surveillance, they want to control these people, they want to censor people who question what they're doing. Then you have what happened to Trump with this ludicrous ruling, this Letitia James, who ran on strictly on the fact she was going to put Trump in jail, which is just horrifying to think that someone would be willing to do that, to do this Stalinistic type of trial. And she's so stupid, she doesn't even understand what she's doing. She's so anti-American. It's unbelievable to me that this could happen. And then, of course, we have Schumer today, who could have said something to these people, don't do it. But no, now he wants everything to be bipartisan. It just makes me freaking sick as to what's going on. And, of course, as Vivek and Trump were talking about, yeah, those votes, they were never there to begin with. And there's still, as Angelina will tell you, she's actually on the committee to do a recount for the Dave McCormick and Casey recount if they need to do it. And she's already had about 4 sleepless nights counting votes. I mean, actually, I called her house up, and her daughter answered the phone and said, "Mom's counting in numbers. I don't know what she's talking about." And she's asleep, I think. So, I mean, that's all she's got in her head is the numbers.
Yeah, the election. Unfortunately, election day is not just a day anymore; it's a season. And all of the stories, just out of Montgomery County, out of Bucks County, out of more than just Pennsylvania. Across the country, there's still so many issues to be dealt with. But that number, I don't think it was misogyny that kept people home. I think it was a completely different reason why those numbers were so different. And
speaking of count, Tim, you'd be really great to do. I've got Andy Meehan on the phone. He's the head of the Right for Bucks people in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which not too far from your Jersey home, just across the river. And what the Right for Bucks people have done over the last several years has been absolutely amazing. They've actually started to be successful where the Republican Party in Bucks County, they kept on grabbing defeat out of victory. And Andy is here to talk about what is going on in Bucks County right now with what they're doing with the vote totals to try to swing this thing to Casey. So, Andy, bring me up to date on what's going on.
Hi, Stan. I don't really have insight into exactly what's going on with the Casey recount. We did have a number of our people up at the Board of Elections meeting yesterday morning, and it was a rather contentious, so to speak, very combative. The commissioner, Diane Marseglia, is very arrogant and very dismissive. She'd rather call people that question legitimate problems with the election deniers, and try to attack them, saying that how dare you question us for our hard work? How dare you question that we have $1 million left in the bank that we're using to pay overtime to our people, when you would think that they'd be getting paid undertime because of all the long lines that we had in Bucks County, and them only hiring 2 people to man the early voting centers. So we also had issues with regards to provisional ballots being accepted or not, and some of them have with these ballots that mail-in ballots that came in that weren't dated properly. Per the Supreme Court ruling of Pennsylvania earlier this year, those ballots are not supposed to be counted. However, the commissioners in Bucks County made a decision that they didn't want to disenfranchise those voters, and the ballots they know were mailed out between this date and received back between this date. So because they didn't have their dates on them, geez, we can't do that to these people. So they're having liberties with the rulings from the Supreme Court on what is and isn't allowed. So I don't really have a firm grasp on the magnitude of it, the numbers, but it's obvious that they're kind of playing loosey-goosey with the rules to be generous, and there's a reason why Bob Casey is hanging around, not conceding defeat. Maybe he's thinking that some friends of his are going to use nefarious means by which to steal an election for him. And if the commissioners are concerned, really, they would be more transparent and they would be listening to their judges of elections and people that are coming and answering these questions rather than poo-pooing them and demonizing them for standing up for election integrity. So there is another meeting tomorrow morning, continuance of that meeting, but they're not going to allow public comment at the meeting. So we really don't know if there's going to be any, substantive debate or transparency out of the Bucks County Board of Elections. Unfortunately, that's where we are.
Well, that you would think that they would want public input, but I've often found elected officials do not like the public going up against them at all, and they shut them down all the time. We see that in our school boards. I know you've seen it in Bucks County school boards, what they've tried to do with people that are objecting to certain policies and want to voice their opinion. They just shut them down completely. This all has to do with this gulag type of government that has been happening over the last 5 years. Actually, it started with Obama, and hopefully January 20th we will begin to get ourselves out of this particular mindset and start caring about America, about our fellow Americans, and have debates that are meaningful and not just so hateful, and all these ad hominem attacks that are being done. Andy, I appreciate everything. Now, you have a big event coming up in this week on Saturday, correct?
Yeah, we're having a victory celebration up in Ivyland at a private location there, and it's probably going to be indoors because it's going to be a little windy on Saturday, we think. But we're going to have the well-strung band there, and the Trump Train band, and there'll be some vendors and merchandise, and we're inviting everybody to come out and just all come together and celebrate, all the hard work that was done by a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations, and to bring home this victory for President Trump. So, we're going to take a little victory lap and then get back to work with the local elections for next year, things that are upcoming. We need to plan for the next battle. We can't rest on our laurels. We got to keep the foot on the gas and keep rolling forward here.
Yeah. So, Tim, if you're not doing anything Saturday, show up there. These are great things, and the Trump Train band has a lot of great parody songs that you would actually love to hear. Some are pretty funny. And the guy who does the singing is the guy on the phone right now. And he also has a good sense of humor. So just to say, if you wanted to do anything different, definitely check them out. I'm sure Andy would be glad to take you around and introduce you to people.
Absolutely, Tim. You're more than welcome to come and say a few words, and we'd love to hear from you and share with our people, what you've been through and what's happening there as we, prepare hopefully for President Trump to pardon these folks and get some transparency, because people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and the rest of these dirtbags that get to persecute people and then bury their own crimes and all their nefarious activity of framing people and putting people up to lying on the stand, all these other things that they've accused of. we really need some accountability on this stuff, and so we're hoping, for the best. And it looks from what we see out of Trump that he's pretty serious about getting some of these things done. So hopefully, it's not just going to get swept under the rug, and these people, have no accountability whatsoever.
So, Tim, you'll recognize Andy because he's going to be the best-looking guy there at the event, just to let you know. and you can go on the Right for Bucks website. What is it, rightforbucks.com, Andy? Andy.
Correct, yeah. On that website, you can see our calendar. And so we have our event for Saturday from 12 to noon in Ivyland, Bucks County. It's open to the public. It's a free event. And then we have our Sunday Zoom meetings that would be, discuss our activities and things that we're planning. We do have a petition drive that we're working on in Bucks County to get select townships to put a referendum on the ballot next spring to get rid of the machines. So we don't want to wait around for people to get voted out of office to repeal 77 to get rid of these stinking machines. We're taking the bull by the horns, and we're forcing this issue along. And we also have an event planned for January 20th, when once again I will be returning to the site of the fake insurrection, where I was 4 years ago, and saw what went down there myself personally. And we're going to go down to celebrate the inauguration of President Trump on J20. We have a few buses going, and that too is open for people to join in, and you can see all the info at the Right for Bucks website.
While I got you both on the phone, Trump has been making some important cabinet selections, and one of the latest ones, of course, is Pete Hegseth. Now, I've read a couple of his books. Of course, I've seen him on Fox and everything else like that. Angelina, you have a whole set of everything. This guy is Princeton graduate, Harvard graduate. How many medals? He's got all kind of medals.
All sorts of medals, all sorts of accolades. He's won the Bronze Star twice, Combat Infantryman badge, Army Commendation Medal twice, National Defense Service Medal. The list goes on, but it's amazing how tone deaf still the left is. Elizabeth Warren got completely dragged for her criticism of Trump selecting a quote-unquote weekend news host. So what do you guys think about that choice for Department of Defense?
Well,
Tim, why don't you go first?
To be perfectly frank, I don't know as much as maybe I ought to about the gentleman. I did watch him in prison on TV. It was either watch him on Fox and Friends or it was David Muir on ABC News, and the only people who enjoyed watching David Muir were the kitty diddlers. So I think he's the better option of in terms of anchors, online anchors. He's my choice too.
Yeah, well, normally you can gauge the quality and the threat level of the people that Trump is appointing by the reaction of these idiots like Pocahontas and the others. So if Liz Warren doesn't like this guy and says he's unqualified, to me the default reaction is, well, he must be very qualified, and she's very scared because look at the way she's reacting.
Yeah.
There's also, now that I think about it, let me just say this too. You notice he's not appointing a general or a higher up within the DOD. And, again, as I'd said, those of us who served, we kind of get a taste of, like, the upper echelons of the military are very political. I think it's kind of telling he didn't choose a higher ranking officer in the military. It may be that Trump doesn't trust the establishment within the military-industrial complex, so to speak.
Well, I'm sure being around it and me seeing it a little bit when I was in the Army for 6 years, there's a lot of ass-kissing that goes on in
Absolutely.
the military. And he's been interviewed with Pete a couple of times, and Pete was very involved in the last administration because he was very much in support of the veterans and improved the veterans hospitals and everything. And there was a lot of things that were done in the Trump administration that really improved the veterans' lives, which has completely been forgotten in the Biden administration, which somehow I wish that we could do something and then it stays in force. So he's had an interaction with him, and Trump to me, as I said, is a different type of guy today than he was back in 2016, and he knows who he wants there. He wants intelligent people, people that make things happen, and to win the Bronze Star twice, and to be a Princeton graduate and a Harvard graduate, and I've read some of his books. This guy is definitely on the high end of the scale, and I think he's going to be great. What do you think of the CIA appointment? Radcliffe was appointed head of the CIA. That's something, Tim, you might have a little bit more insight than we do here. I know a little bit about Radcliffe, but what is your feeling about that? First off, I tell you this, there's about 51 former FBI heads. I would automatically, on January 20th, get rid of their security clearance, because Brennerman and these guys, they are, to me, criminals, absolute criminals. They don't care about America, and they should be taken off the security clearance list. But go ahead, Tim.
Well, again, this is sort of a situation where I'm not as informed as I ought to be, but what I have heard is that this is a gentleman who helped bring to light the hoax nature of some of the Russia claims against President Trump, and so I think it's an important thing. If I'm accurate, I think it's an important thing that the President Trump staffs his administration with loyalists, and this is especially important for the CIA. And the reason is, everybody seems to think that that a lot of these intelligence agencies or law enforcement agencies, that they answer to a certain chain of command. That's just not true. The FBI might be under the Department of Justice, for instance, but the CIA is not under anything. The CIA is an independent administration, and so in theory it answers to the president, but it's not under a department head like the Defense Intelligence Agency being under the Department of Defense. It's important to keep the CIA under under the president's thumb, because if they have too much independence, that's when they start getting a little shady, let's say. So it's important for him to have a loyalist in there, because if not, they're going to sabotage him just like they have in the past.
Yeah, I would venture to say that I have had very little trust in the CIA. And I have interviewed with Jack Devlin, who was in the CIA for a number of years, and he is a South Jersey boy, long since retired, great guy, and he was in the old CIA now, and he came in the late 60s. I believe that there's evidence that's going to prove that the CIA was involved in President Kennedy's death, because it just doesn't make sense as to how that's gone down. So I have very little trust in the CIA, and I think they do go off on a tangent, and you never want an agency to have that much power to be able to do international things, to do other things in a certain way. You need to have a president that is able to put them down. And remember Schumer saying that if you go after the CIA, they've got more ways than Sundays to get back at you.
Yep.
That is so true. And Tim, you've actually faced it.
Oh yeah.
You've been in there. You've been in there.
Well, it's worse, because he was bragging on the news. Schumer's bragging that Trump's language has really offended the intelligence communities. They don't like it, and it's basically threatening that something was going to happen to Trump as a result of it. I mean, here's the truth: the presidency is a unitary form of governance. Like, we think of Congress, it's got two houses, it's divided. It's a check on itself. You think of the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, you have majority decisions, and then you have dissents. The presidency is not supposed to work like that. When the executive branch was first founded, it was just the president. And then you had Jefferson as Secretary of State, and you had a couple departments that were made out of there. But initially, it was just the president and I guess the vice president, John Adams. They are the executive branch. And so the presidency and the executive branch aren't supposed to be divided. Bureaucrats, intelligence agents, they are not supposed to have any say whatsoever on how the president runs his administration. Now, that's within reason. The president has to follow the Constitution. But at the end of the day, we need to get back to the idea that the executive branch is an expression of the will of the president and nothing else. Otherwise, as we just talked about, you're going to have fifth columnists undermining the president every step of the way. And thank God he's got the experience from his first term, and he's trying to fill it with loyalists, because back then, as you recall, you know how it was. Every step of the way, every time he tried to do anything, even within his own administration, there were people trying to undermine him, and we just can't have that. This is his last term, the last term he can have, and he's got a clean house.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens on that. Listen, we're going to take a quick station identification. We'll be right back at the Don't Back Down show. And when you come back with number, hold on a minute, cut number 6.
That's my favorite cut.
Uh-oh, can't find the right button. So I will fill the air.
Do you have any jokes for us today, Stan? Well, you are listening to WWDBAM, 860 AM at the Don't Back Down show with Stan Casacio,
and
Angelina Banks, and we don't have Andy Titleman, but our guests today, we have Tim Hale and we have Andy Meehan on with us today.
There's got to be a better way.
Okay.
The fellow whose job sitting in one of our big busy agencies here is to have papers arrive at his desk, memorandums and so forth, look at them, figure out where they're supposed to go, initial them, and send them on their way. One day, a paper arrived that was classified. But it had come to his desk, so he read it, he initialed it, and sent it on to where he figured it should go. It arrived back at his desk the next day with a memo that said, "You weren't supposed to read this. Erase your initials and initial the erasure."
That joke.
Thank you very much. Wow.
That joke clearly defines the bureaucracy. I thought that's old Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan loved his humor. He did have some great jokes.
Well, did you see the new thing, the FDA recall because for 8,000 units of Costco butter because the label didn't say contains milk?
Yeah.
Like, what is butter? Butter is made from milk, but that's where we are.
I mean, that's the stupidity of some of our agencies. When these people get some powers, and I've run into it, especially with some of the younger people. I remember doing a job in a supermarket, and we had the whole area covered with plastic because, we were concerned about dust and everything else. And the young lady came in, and I think she's about 22, 23. It's just got it. And she wanted to close down the supermarket. I'm talking about a 70,000 square foot supermarket that had thousands of people come in a day to buy food. And because the draping that was done was not quite 100% sealed in the right direction, so you want to shut everything down. Instead of saying, "Hey, listen, can you get some tape and tape some of this stuff a little bit better than what you got it, because it looks like it could have some leakage there." And so I had to go up to higher up to finally get it to back off, because it was the most ludicrous thing. So these public agencies, although they have a function and they are necessary in a lot of cases, in many cases, boy, the power goes right to their head, and they go completely nuts on this stuff. So that's my feeling about these agencies. So now, getting back to some of these appointments, the appointment that really is coming up is, or the one that's already been done. There was a election between Scott and Senator Thune, and Cornyn. I was never a Cornyn fan because he's definitely a rhino-ish type of person as far as I was concerned. I didn't trust him as far as I could throw him. Scott had some issues because of how he ran the senatorial campaign a number of years ago, where he had $120 million, and supposedly they didn't really put their money in the right places, probably because they didn't focus enough on the rigged elections that were occurring back then. But it looks like Thune got the appointment. He's from South Dakota, I believe, and he's been around for a while. Do you have any feelings about Senator Thune and him becoming the majority leader of the Senate?
Well, from my perspective, I can say that I'm not very confident in his leadership, and this is again more personal than anything. There are two swamp creatures that were nominated, and they have a long history of suggesting that people like myself should be rotting in prison for a long time. So, maybe that's
yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, and so it's everybody was pearl clutching after that time, and I understand that, but I don't think he's ever changed his position. Frankly, my main priority though is that President Trump has a reliable ally in the Senate so that he can actually get things done. I remember when he won the first time, and Republicans controlled both houses of Congress back then, and they did absolutely jack squat. So my fear is that there's going to be a repeat of that despite the R next to their names, they're going to be a do-nothing Congress. But I also I'm also a realist. I've spent a lot of time reading political philosophy and history, and I understand that power flows to the man who knows. And so I recognize the Senate. Even in the Constitution, you see the difference in age requirement between the Senate and the House. The Senate is kind of an old man's, club, so to speak. You have to be able to negotiate things. The problem is we're, venturing the point of collapse as a country, and we really don't have the time to, be negotiating over pork barrel projects. But it's my hope that Trump is able to negotiate with these guys behind the scenes. At the end of the day, whether it's a yes man or whether it's an opportunist like McConnell, if he can negotiate something that works in our favor, then so be it. Again, I recognize not everybody in Congress that has an R next to their name is really an America First candidate. I think we are still in the minority, but the question is, can we get things done? So here's hoping. I'm not confident, but I'm hopeful.
Andy, do you have any feelings about that? I know, that being as politically active as you are and watching some of these people, what do you think?
It should be a hard no for any of these guys who came out like they did against people like Tim, who were set up on J6 and persecuted. And beyond that, President Trump was just elected with a massive mandate, and they should have the respect to say, hey, President Trump thinks Rick Scott's the guy for the job. Let's give him the guy he thinks is right for the job. It's pretty simple to me.
Yeah. Well, the latest vote was that Thune got the position. The real grudge I have against these people is when they were seeing all this information, they were not attempting to look the other way. There were very few people in the House and the Senate. I think there was a couple, Jim Jordan, a couple other people had some questions. And, of course, they're very sensitive to the public opinion and what's going on. But it takes a very courageous person to say, wait a minute, we're only seeing one side of the story here. I got to know more about this as to how this happened. I mean, to call it an insurrection, nobody was armed there. That wasn't an insurrection. There was clearly a protest about it. But, if they went in there with, they had AK-47s and everything else, then, that would be an insurrection, because then you'll be using force of arms. But, there were people walking through the Capitol building really, truly as sightseers. Some of the video I've seen, these people were walking through, and it was, to see their Capitol. So it really bothers me that these people automatically, the switch went off. Oh, yeah, we have to pick on these people because this is what I'm hearing. They did not ask for cooler heads to really judge this. And they should know. Look, they've been in secret hearings and hearings that are in the, what do they call it, in the tunnel, whatever there's a name for it that they have there, that nothing supposedly can get out. And they should know how this stuff works, and they should ask these questions about it. So those are the things that really bothered me, that these people can't, step back for a minute and ask for cooler heads to be had, because there's always three sides to every story I found out. And the truth lies somewhere in between for the most part. And clearly January 6th, automatically you guys were guilty. Anybody that went there was guilty. Whether you got caught in restricted areas or not. I just was one of those people that wasn't in any restricted area or anything else like that. So I was probably outside the realm of being looked at. But I think if this administration, Harris had won, I believe that anybody who was there, the close to 1 million people that were there, we'd probably all be facing some kind of gulag time. And that's what I feel. They were going to continue to hunt us down continually.
Well, I think one of the things, Stan, is that beyond the loyalty factor, which obviously is huge with this, it's obvious that these guys have expressed really bad judgment in not being able to see what those of us who were there and saw what go down was all plain to see, that this was a setup and that it was facilitated by the three-letter agencies and that they didn't have number one, the intellectual curiosity to gather the facts and form a knowledgeable opinion, and then they don't have the courage to stand up to the attacks from the fake news media and the rest of them saying, you've got to sign on to this, this is an insurrection, blah, blah. No, we need people of courage who are going to say no to this. And that's why I think people like Pete Hegseth and Tom Holman have been selected. And it's for their loyalty and their courage. And they're going to do the right thing, and they don't care what the media says about them.
The other thing that's really in talking about the bureaucracy, of course, it's just been notified that Elon Musk and Vivek are going to head up a kind of a review of the bureaucracy to see where stuff could be cut. And it was really interesting listening to Vivek. He said, listen, the first thing I would do on January 21st is tell every bureaucrat they have to come back to the office. And he said, probably there you probably lose maybe a good number of people, because most people, they don't want to go back. They just want to work from home and do their thing. But he said the first thing you do is make them come and work in their office from 8 to 4:30, 8 to 5, whatever it is. And I thought that was an interesting take about it. That alone would ferret out some people. And then he went through the next level of stuff, retirements, having people retire. So he said it's not going to be that dramatic. It's just you don't replace these people. And then, of course, you've got the Department of Education, which people really want to end completely because it only serves the teachers' union and it serves that educational industrial complex that I like to call that. There is truly an educational industrial complex. Mm. So what's your feeling about Vivek and about Elon Musk?
Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, what's it called? Doge or something like that. And
no wonder the stock spiked yesterday.
Yeah, the Doge stock, yeah. So it's really interesting. Andy, we'll take you first. What's your feeling about that?
Well, I mean, we look at what our government is and what it's made up of, and it's largely made up of people who have accomplished nothing in private enterprise and business, have been shepherded along the way, like Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. They work for the government their whole life. It isn't just Democrats, it's Republicans too. And we need civil servant leaders who are going to go get a job done in Washington and then get the hell out of there without all these entanglements and all of the money that's in with it. So people that are private business people like Elon and Vivek, they're not beholden to this bureaucrat class, and they're not looking for the next, lobbyist job or, military industrial complex job. So these are obviously the type of people that if we're going to cut spending and waste and deconstruct this monstrosity of a bureaucracy, that these are the kind of people that you need to do it, because they're not beholden to the class that's in power.
Yeah, Tim, do you have? You must have done. Were you able to do a lot of reading when you were there in prison? Did they give you books, access to books?
I was able to do more reading in prison than in jail. When I was in jail, I did get to read some of a law library, but other than that, the reading was the literature was somewhat to be desired. But I did get to read a little bit in prison. I got to peruse some of my favorite histories, like Edward Gibbon's and the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. I agree. I agree pretty much with everything that he just said, but I would also add the caveat that we should always question authority, even if it doesn't come from a government background. It's kind of interesting because from our perspective, we respect businessmen, entrepreneurs, and those who pull themselves up by the bootstrap. And really, that's really a microcosm of the American dream and the American experience. This country was founded by settlers. This country was founded by explorers and people going out on a journey. But at the same time, we must also remember people like Mark Zuckerberg. There's always another side to the coin. I like Elon Musk and I like Vivek Ramaswamy, but I also know that men are men, regardless of what their authority is or what their position is. You can tell a lot about a man based on how he treats those he has power over. So I like the track record Musk has so far when it comes to free speech on the internet, but he is, at the end of the day, he is a tech tycoon. So I want to see what he does. I think he's going to do a good job, but I also want to keep an eye on anybody who's appointed to a position of power, and especially somebody who was never elected. Now, granted, I think that they have a mandate. They joined the Trump team. Most people support Donald Trump who support Elon Musk or vice versa now. But I think that this is make or break. We need to keep an eye on everybody who's working alongside President Trump, because you never know where the knife is going to come from.
Amen to that.
Yep,
Amen
100%.
to that.
And I think it's really important. I think sometimes people forget, the various pies that Elon has his hands in. And so, people rallied behind him when he did become a big defender for free speech, and then him buying Twitter and now it being at X, allowing some of the voices to be heard. But people are still being censored. People still don't have their accounts restored. And for some people, the transhumanism aspect of what Elon is really into is a little off-putting.
Yep.
But for when it comes to what we need for this administration and what Vivek's always been vocal about with, cutting government bloat, the bloat within the bureaucracy, I'm excited for this team. And I don't know if you guys have seen that meme going around, but it's Elon's face and Vivek's face on the guys from The Office, and the line says, "What exactly do you do here?"
Oh, yeah, Office Space. I love that movie. Yeah, it's great.
So I am really looking forward to, better management of our tax dollars and getting rid of, spaces in offices and roles that don't serve the people but only, really reach to enslave them and make our lives worse. But you're 100% spot on with you still have to remain vigilant when men are given great power over lots of different people,
Well,
especially
power
when they're
corrupts,
not.
absolutely.
Yep.
So that's you have to just assume
Lord-
that's going to happen.
Lord Acton. Yep.
Yep.
I'll take the government spending cuts. You can keep the microchips in my brain. Thank you.
Exactly.
Boy, he's actually writing material as he's doing this show, so he's going to do the comedy routine. One thing I remember reading about Elon Musk, and when he took over Twitter, now X, and he was trying. Of course, obviously, he cut tons of jobs, and all these woke people didn't have their little restaurant to go to, and everything else they had to go to work. So he cut so much of the force, and they kept that's going to go bankrupt. But he cut all that, and then it came to these servers. Now they had huge number of servers, and they had this one huge warehouse with all these servers in it, and it was costing him a fortune. And he had warehouses that he owned that he could put them into. So he drives up there and with his own, he's flying somewhere else. He flies back to where he was, gets these tractor trailers, takes a bunch of people, goes up to the warehouse, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what happened, and literally goes in there and starts pulling the plug out of these servers and pushing them into the physically himself. This was his just his hatred of wasted money, and probably is the reason why he's a billionaire today, and probably why I am not a billionaire today, because I waste more money than anything. But it just seems like, with that type of mindset, we're going to be in a very unique position. I do want to play one thing, and I'm trying to remember if I have it right. If you can play 16, can you do 16? Which is JFK Jr. and Tucker on election night. And I want you to listen to RFK, JFK Jr. RFK Jr., sorry. You got it? Okay, here we go.
one way or another, we are going to end the chronic disease epidemic.
The reason that I think that you will be given the authority to do that is because I've been at a bunch of different public events with you over the past couple of months, and the reception that you receive from Trump voters is so shocking to me, second only to Trump himself. For all the people I've seen with Trump, you get the biggest response from Republican voters. It's so, is that shocking to you?
Well, it is shocking. And, I was just out here.
I mean, your name was Bobby Kennedy. Yeah. They love you.
Well, there's been a complete inversion between the Democratic and Republican Party. When I was a kid, the Democratic Party was the party of peace. Now it's the party of war. It's the party of Dick Cheney, John Bolton, the military-industrial complex, the Ukraine war. They own it. It was the party of constitutional rights. Now it's the party of surveillance and censorship and the weaponization of the federal law enforcement agencies against American democracy. It was the party that stood up for working people, for poor people, for labor unions, and today it is the party of big pharma, Wall Street, big tech, big ag, the military-industrial complex, big data, and Wall Street, and it's also the party that's completely abandoned the working class base in this country. You look at the labor unions with Sean O'Brien, who's the head of the biggest union in our country, and who's a beautiful man, incredible man.
Excellent guy, I agree.
He's an insurgent. He came out of Boston. He overthrew the old PAFA legatees of the Teamsters, and he is the most popular president that they've had in generations. And almost 70%, I think 65% of Teamsters are Trumpers. This is true in labor unions across the country. The rank and file, the leaders of the union are often still Democrat. The rank and file are overwhelmingly Republican. And that was not true when I was a kid. And, one of the interesting things, when I was a kid, the Republican Party was the party that had all the money. Because they had all the big corporations on their side.
The Country Club Party.
When I was a kid, 70% in 1980, when I ran part of my Uncle Ted's presidential campaign, 70% of the wealth in this country was owned by Republicans. 30% was owned by Democrats. In 2020, 70% of the wealth in this country was owned by Democrats and 30% Republicans. So you've had this complete inversion of the two parties. And I'll give you another example. My Uncle Ted Kennedy wrote Title IX. The Democratic Party, one of the core issues was women's sports. And today, the Democratic Party is the party that is dismantling women's sports. I read that there have been now, I think, over 2,000 or 3,000 medals.
Oh, it's over. Okay, so listening to RFK Jr. and when they talked about the response, I caught that when he would come into the room in these big auditoriums. I mean, the response to him being there was overwhelming. I was lucky enough. Actually, I shook hands and met his father. I also shook hands kind of in a crazy way with JFK when he was president. But Andy and I were down at his announcing he was running for president in Philadelphia, and we were there. We got a chance to shake hands with him and talk to him a little bit. And he is an interesting guy, and I could see why he was so well liked by many people in these auditoriums when he came up. I mean, it was just so unique. I mean, him and Tulsi Gabbard got huge because there was a certain awareness by him. He was not willing to just go down the line with the Democratic Party, despite all the crap he got from his own family, which, by the way, I've had members of my family when I was supporting Trump the first time. I mean, I was disinvited to Thanksgiving and everything else. I mean, it did happen out there, and it's such a shame that this has happened. It's changed the relationship between all of us over the years. But he recognized that he didn't leave the Democratic Party. They left him. And he was courageous enough to say, wait a minute, Donald Trump sought me out, wanted to know what I could add to this country in the area of his specialty, which is in the going after illness and things like that because he had a lot of environmental cases and other cases that he did. And Trump is giving him the ability to go head to head with these people. I'd love to see him and Rand Paul go after Fauci. I really would. Fauci should be in jail. That's my feeling. Tim, what do you think? I'm going to take Tim first. What do you think of RFK Jr. Switching parties and his position with the health of America? By the way, I have to preface this. Everybody says he's an anti-vaxxer. In this interview, he says, "I am not an anti-vaxxer." He says, I'm not objecting to vaccines. It's the fact that these vaccines are not being tested enough. And some of them have not been because there's this liability wall that's been created that protects these pharmaceutical companies from the results of these vaccines. And he wants that to be lifted so that there's more effort put to make sure we don't put poison in our body.
And full disclosure for science. Actual informed consent. And once people that obviously have the option to vaccinate, fully informed about what else could happen.
Yeah. So, Tim, why don't you take it first, and Andy, you can comment on it.
Yeah, well, I definitely think he has sort of that rock star presence to him. I actually saw him at Madison Square Garden at Trump's big, New York rally.
You were there.
Oh, yeah.
You were there. It wasn't Madison Square Garden. You were in that, Angelina, that you asked.
No, that was Oaks.
You were in Oaks, Pennsylvania. But go ahead, Tim.
No, I mean he got quite the applause from the crowd, and it seems like it's a genuine mission he's on. What's funny is like before the neoliberals and neoconservatives really got to their apex this past decade. There was a point where, at least even in the early 2000s, you thought some politicians were genuine. Like, I never questioned the genuine. I never questioned that, say like Ralph Nader was genuine, even though I didn't support him. I think that we might be going back to a time where people who call themselves progressive, like I think RFK would, are generally trying to bring things back to where they actually serve the public good and the public interest. Not everybody's going to agree with his environmental or his health positions, but these are questions that the mainstream parties have sort of abandoned because they don't actually care about the public welfare. They merely care about the warfare state. He's another character, kind of like Musk, where he kind of came into Trump's orbit or was invited in. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing because I think in the long run, in order to have a successful empire, the different interests that are at play in the country need to learn to work together. But I think that as long as everybody knows where they stand, then I think we can work together. And I hope he does make America healthy again. I hope he does, and I wish him luck. Because there's a lot of people that don't want us to be healthy.
Yes, Tim, I want to bring on someone who actually faced something a little different, and you probably know her story, but play the little bit before we introduce her. I'm going to have Angelina introduce her.
Poor and neglected communities like mine are suffering. And who else in here is sick and tired of being sick and tired?
And that, my friends, is the voice of someone who I actually have met several times, shared a stage with. That is the lovely and fearless and amazing Madeline Brame. Thank you so much for joining us today, all the way from New York City.
Yeah, and Madeline, Stan is here. We have Tim Hale on and Andy Mann, but Tim Hale has been kind of in his own gulag, and to a certain degree, the things that happened to you and what you've did and the fight that you've done, the two of you are both basically fighters because you were basically in a gulag too because of how they were treating you after a tragic thing that happened to your family.
Yes.
And so what we asked him, and he talked about it in the show, as a J6er who was in prison and was finally released because of the Supreme Court ruling, his outlook of what he looks for in 2025 after January 20th. What are your thoughts and hopes for the the Trump administration, because you gave time to the Trump administration because they heard you and they recognized your plight. What is your hopes will happen in this Trump administration?
Well, hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me on once again. My hope is, number one, that not just for the administration, but also for the United States as a whole, is that we finally understand and realize that we must keep God first. Okay, if we don't put God back into every aspect, all right, of our life, where he was removed from the school to, just across the board, right? We have to bring God back into our everyday, daily living. But on another hand, excuse me, I finished working and my mind just scrambles. It's all over the place. I deal with numbers. So I'm trying to switch gears. Anyway,
Angelina's been doing recounts. I know her mind scrambled with numbers too.
I'm trying to switch gears. As I think that the Trump administration, as long as he continues to appoint those strong people that he's been appointing, those that are tried and true, who have a history of doing the work that he is appointing them to do, who have an attitude of America first, that no matter what, they're going to step in there and they're going to do the heavy lift, okay, and they're going to be tough but fair. I feel that, he will have a successful term. Right? Now, will there be obstacles? Will there be stumbling blocks? Will there be mistakes that are made? Absolutely, because we're human. However, I do anticipate this to be a very productive 4 years going forward. I look for our economy to begin to gain back its strength. I look for us to have the standing around the world that we, are known for, be respected among foreign leaders and dignitaries. The crime, I'm looking for the crime for legislation to be passed that rolls back the policies that are currently in place that are creating this environment of lawlessness. I also, look for a policy that will help to strengthen and protect the rights for victims of violent crime and families of homicide victims, not just those that were killed because of the illegals. I'm talking about everyday Americans that were victimized by the inmates who were released from the prisons because of the failed bail reform policies, raise the age, less is more, and also repeat violent felony offenders that they continue to release with no consequences. And they keep committing crime and hurting more people. So I'm looking for strong legislation. I also look to be a part of helping them draft that legislation, and hopefully name it in honor of my son, Sergeant Hassan Korea. So I'm looking for big things to happen here. I'm looking for the borders to be secured. I'm looking for, Trump to do exactly what he said he was going to do, start deporting them, right? Especially those that are here.
I have, Madeline, I have to say that I have, Holman has been appointed, and he's a no-nonsense guy, and he's going to deport these people, especially the criminals and the gangs and stuff like that. And I said, if the countries don't want them, like Venezuela probably doesn't want these people back, I said, put them all on a C-130, give them all parachutes, fly over Venezuela, and just push them out of the plane. I just had that vision of that happening.
I don't know if that's entirely acceptable, Sam, but no.
I don't think that that can't be a thing.
It was a dream.
I mean,
I'm sure Tim can come up with a joke on that.
It could be an option. But
free skydiving.
You did. Right.
Free skydiving.
You did touch on something that I was wondering. Is there a place for you in this next Trump administration, whether or not, having the opportunity to, influence policy or, put a hand in some legislation or serve on a council? Has anybody in the transition team reached out to you?
Not yet. I'm looking. I see that, they're probably going in some type of systematic order, all right, in appointing these people. All right, and I think, he hasn't even been sworn in yet. What are we, less than 10 days in? Mm-hmm. Less than 10 days in, so he's appointing, huh?
You know what I'd love to see is people like you, the angel moms, the people like you that have faced this tragic event that happened, to be able to come to Washington periodically and meet with the FBI director, meet with the DOJ, to let them so they can feel and touch people that have experienced this. There seems to be this wall they don't really get, and you see it so much. That's why Trump was able to make this impact, because people actually felt he was touching them and understanding who they were. There seems to be this lack of ability to understand people like you, the tragedy that they face. So it's really, really important. I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, me too. There's a huge disconnect. There's a huge disconnect. It's like they make policies and put things in place that they think are going to be beneficial or helpful when they really don't know what the issues are. All right, they see it from a different perspective. All right, they're not, like you said, they're not like really affected by it, and they're not it doesn't influence their decision. And what Trump did, what was very unique and what was very, very appealing, especially to the black community, is where he came into the communities and he actually had conversations with the people, right? He went on different shows and different things like that where he sat and he heard people out. And like you said, he connected with the people. And that's what was necessary. That's why he was able to move the needle in the black, in the black minority communities, is because he, is a real person. He's a real person, even though he is a billionaire or whatever, but still, he's still a real person. He understands that these issues. He understands these issues. So, go ahead.
I was going to just, agree with your point. And so that's something that we had said before on the show, that when, he would go to different places, he was giving people a seat at a table to hear their real concerns so that he could craft ideas and policies that would be immensely beneficial. Where on the other hand, the vice president would come into town and she'd bring in Megan Thee Stallion. And it was just
and pay her to come in town.
Yes, we haven't even touched upon the scandal of the mismanagement and like the stand-up gentleman that he was.
I never got paid $1.
None of us ever got paid for all of the accusations of all of us being paid. Not one of us, was out of the goodness for our own hearts. And Oprah's out here saying she didn't get any money.
What was really, really disrespectful about what Harris did when she rolled out Megan Thee Stallion and Dirty Red and all those, she disrespected black women, right? Because she, in her mind, it was as if all black women appeal to that and aspire to be like these, whatever that is, whatever that.
Well, they think in terms of they think in terms of blocks instead of thinking about individuals. And when you start thinking in terms of that, the humanistic part of you goes away. And that's where the failure is of government, the humanistic part. Like what happened to Tim Hale? If there was anybody that had a humanistic feeling, they would say, wait a minute, let's take a look at this. We can't treat people like this. We have to do more than what we're doing. In fact, murderers had more rights than Tim did, and he didn't even do anything. And this is the aggravation that I get. And I saw that with Trump. He's a human guy, and you can see he actually has love for the people, which is something I have not seen in my lifetime, other than maybe a little bit of Robert Kennedy Sr. Having been involved in his campaign when he ran. You really felt this connection with the people. He really felt the people, and he was a millionaire. He never really worked a day in his life. I mean, he was an attorney and everything else. But when he spoke, when he met you, you felt that he felt your pain, whatever it is. Clinton could do it, but Clinton had another ulterior motive. He was just looking for girls. Tim, you want to say anything on that one, Tim? You got something on that one?
I'll get in more trouble, no.
That's a good line.
I think in order to be be successful. I think in order to be successful, you have to have, you know, a certain type of personality. You have to have character and charisma, and you have to have that certain thing about you. And not everyone has it. You know, when there was an event and we were backstage taking, you know, a photo op with Trump, you know, and he came up to me, he signed everybody's hat. It was a Brexit event, right? He was signing everybody's hat, and I said, my name is Madeline Brain. And he grabbed me by my shoulder and said, oh, my God, Madeline. He said, I love you, and I love your son. I'm so sorry what happened to you. All right, that was after the South Bronx rally. All right, and so he signed my hat. He stood next to me, put his arm around me.
But he remembered you. He remembered
me.
You remembered you. He remembered your son.
And he remembered my son, yes.
I mean,
yes, he did.
That's a human being.
Yep, and that was before you were invited to speak at the RNC. So you were.
That was before.
Yes.
Yep.
That to me,
So I was on his radar. I was on his radar from before even the South Bronx, from Jim Jordan, from the House Judiciary Committee against Alvin Bragg here in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So he
when we testified, or when the victims, he knew the story from back then. Yep.
Alvin Bragg spent, $250 million trying to prosecute Trump. And he spent, didn't have any money to spend to really prosecute the people that killed your son and injured his father? I mean, give me a break.
Nope.
These are misplaced.
That's what they told me. That's right. They didn't have the resources. And
these are misplaced priorities.
Yep.
Misplaced priorities. It is despicable that they would do that. Really, really would do that. So,
and you know, Daniel Penny, our young Marine, who is on trial now. Mm-hmm. Okay, the same assistant district attorney, same ADA, Daphne Uran, is the one who prosecuted my son's case. The same district attorney. Her along with Alvin Bragg. I call them the tag team of corruption.
I don't understand. Yep. Now, you might be able to enlighten me a little bit more. I don't understand. This guy was known to go through these cards and harass people, and in fact, attack people.
Yep.
He was going after this woman, and Penny said, "That's it. I'm going to jump in." He became Batman.
That's right.
And he jumped in there, and I was listening to some testimony. There were people telling him, "You got to hold him tighter because he's still fighting." And he's just trying to hold this guy down because he was a completely raving lunatic. Mm-hmm. He shouldn't even have been. Shouldn't even been allowed to be out.
And someone who was assisting him in restraining this man, also he suffered a broken rib. You know, I'm hoping that justice will prevail and that Daniel Penny is acquitted all charges.
As a matter of fact, he should be given a medal. I think.
This case shouldn't have been brought up. I don't know what is going on in New York.
Well, you know, his attorney, Tom Kenneth, he ran against Alvin Bragg. He lost that election against Alvin. All right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of political stuff going on here with Bragg. All right? There's a lot of vindictive stuff. You know, there's a lot of gotcha moments. And, you know, just like with James, with Letitia James. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And they're using their offices. They're using their offices to go after people. And exactly what they're doing.
And that's a shame that is happening. Want to take a break for a minute? Can we do the commercial? Alexa, the commercial. Can we do the commercial? Because it's after 2:30. We'll be right back with more of the Don't Back Down show.
So do you support Donald Trump making those claims that the Republican mayor says were grossly exaggerated?
President Trump was actually in Aurora, Colorado, talking to people on the ground. And what we're hearing, of course, Martha, is that people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs. Martha,
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. So
yeah, and play number 9, too, which is another interesting exchange with J.D. Vance and Donna Bash.
Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please, ask a question, and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let me answer it.
Yes, I am.
And that's what we were dealing with, and that's what Tim was dealing with. That's what so many people in America were dealing with. Just a complete lack of human appreciation of your fellow human being to give them any kind. And I must tell you, J.D. Vance, one thing you tell about him, he is polite. But boy, will he be able, he zings you with politeness.
Yes.
I mean, when he was debating Walz, I was laughing because he was just so sneaky quick and a perfect gentleman in making his point. And it allowed people to really understand who he was as a person.
Well, and also it allowed people to really hear the issues and the answers instead of just having what we're used to from these talking heads and just hammering points that are either, false, not true, or just grossly exaggerated. That was one thing that I really appreciated from Senator Vance, now, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, was his ability to pivot and stay on task and get across the point that he was trying to make and get the truth out to the American people. I thought it was fantastic.
Tim, were you able to read Hillbilly Elegy at all? Have you been able to read that?
No, I never did read it, but I attended the event in Pennsylvania where he was with Tucker Carlson. I got to watch him live, and he's actually a remarkable speaker. He's a great public speaker and communicator. That debate was I gotta be honest. The debate he had with Tim Walz had a higher murder rate than the riots in Minneapolis. That was something.
So you were at the Tucker Carlson tour hosted by Moms for America, and that was the one that was in Hershey.
Correct. Yes, and then again, I got to see him, of course, in Madison Square Garden. So yeah, he's a good communicator. He's a principled person, from what I could tell. He supported Patriot Freedom Project years ago before he was considered for any executive position. So I mean, he's principled when it comes to the political persecution, and I'm hopeful that he'll continue Trump's legacy once Trump is done with this next term.
Well, of course, 2028 is pretty far away, but in Pennsylvania we have a governor right now, Governor Shapiro, who has been running for president since kindergarten. So it's going to be interesting. I would recommend that you read that. It was funny. I read the book Hillbilly Elegy a couple of years ago. And then somebody said, they made a movie out of it. I said, really? Who was the director? And it was
Ron Howard. Which is ironic.
Which is really ironic.
Yeah.
So I watched the movie, and the movie was really great. And I thought Glenn Close, I didn't even recognize her in this movie, but she was so great. I thought she should have gotten an Academy Award for the role that she played. And it was interesting. After he became politically active in the Republican Party, became senator, these same people that thrilled with his book, and it's such a book of what he overcame as a person. I mean, it's amazing that he turned out where he is today, and people have to come to grips with that this guy could have gone 6 different ways to Sunday, and he turned out and he picked this path that really has led him to a very unique life that he's had. And obviously, he was a pretty intelligent guy to begin with.
Yeah.
But with a mother that's on crack, no father, basically his grandmother is what influenced him. I highly recommend that to my listeners and to you to read the book. It's a quick read, and then watch the movie because then it really becomes even more impactful. Because then they kind of you can see where he was living and the influences he had. that were there, so get a chance to do it. So I find him quite interesting dude, to say the least. The other thing that seems to be happening today is that there seems to be more Democrats being introspective as to where they were. And, of course, we have the Massachusetts progressives call on fellow Democratic Representative Seth Moulton to resign over trans sports comments. Now, it just so happens that this representative has girls,
right,
as his children.
His biological female daughters.
And he doesn't want some guy running over her on the playing field. And that's so common sense that they now are trying to get rid of him because he's broken this chain. And the left, whatever the left feels, when you break what they want to force you to believe, and you break that, you know, they will just chop you right in half, and you become like nothing to them, which shows you that I always say, show me a Democrat, and I'll ultimately show you a hypocrite at some particular point in life. So,
you know, Solon, when Solon was writing the laws for Athens, he was asked if he gave them the best laws he could conceive of, and he replied, "I gave them the best laws they would receive, or they could take, or they could have, rather." And you know, especially looking back at like the Daniel Penny thing, you know, or even just with the weaponization of law, there comes a point where you have to wonder if we're reaching the apex of our civilization, where the legal system itself serves no function in terms of protecting the public good, and is just degraded or degenerated into really inverting all morality. It's I hope not. I hope we can return to a sense of normalcy. But it is interesting to see that when they're when the shoe's on the other foot, even the other side tends to realize that they're heading towards absolute insanity. So hopefully there'll be some introspection within that side of things. But you never know. You could see that they actually double down on the insanity. You know, and the more radical side of the Democratic Party kind of digs its heels in and takes over, and maybe tries to kick out the more corporate capitalist side, and they end up more radical and progressive.
Interesting perspective on it, Tim. By the way, you know, we really hadn't talked. I mean, I've got to meet you and everything, but this has been a great conversation, and I'd just like to say that some of our best political leaders are political leaders that have gone through fires. You know, we've seen a lot of people in the military who've been under fire become great political leaders because they have an empathy for people. And I must tell you, I think given anybody listening to this conversation can recognize the intelligence on the other end of the line. And I would love to support you if you ever decide to run for Congress or whatever you want to run for in Jersey. I think if that door opens to you, you should take advantage of it and tell your story and be part of creating a new society that would be conscious of their fellow human beings, because I know you would be able to do that very forcefully. So I really acknowledge you. I think I'm sitting with two people here, you on the line and Angeline in front of me, would just be great political people out there, and I feel very confident in their hands. I really would.
Well,
so,
I'm glad you said. I'm glad you said that. I'm now here to announce my candidacy for Washington D.C. dog catcher, and you will.
Yeah, and you're going to clean up. You're going to actually demolish that building for sure. So.
Yeah, but it was a great show. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you, and you know, we're just happy that you were, you know, free enough to speak with us and to continue to shine light upon what's going on. And you know, hopefully we can see some real movement with your brothers that are still unfortunately behind bars. We had a wonderful guest, Andy Meehan with Right for Bucks, joining us, and then always a lovely Madeline Brame. Thank you so much for coming in. Hopefully we'll have Andy in studio next week.
Yes. And Tim, it is true, because Ed Martin is a dear friend of mine, that you guys sang the Star Spangled Banner or God Bless America every evening in the cell, and you could hear each other singing it. Is that true?
Yes, sir. It's a long story, but long story short, after the marshals were moving us around the country, we would just sing it somewhat facetiously, the Star Spangled Banner national anthem, and yeah, it became a sort of a tradition once we were settled in the Gulag. Every night at 9 p.m. we would sing the national anthem together, no matter what.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Tim Hale, one of the J6 people who was totally abused and treated poorly by our country. The show is coming to an end. Tim, thank you so much again. We will pray for your continued success in the future. And again, run for office.
You would have told me 2 years ago,
next
3
week for
years
another
ago
great
that
show.
I would be in the middle of a political movement. I would have said, put down Hunter's crack pipe.